Okay, welcome to part 4, and we're back on the project. I left off in part 3. I just finished putting together the control box. So what I'm going to do now is go and wire up the whole sign. And eventually I'm going to mount the control box behind the sign just like this. That's the plan. So I have it temporarily just on a step stool here. So when I make the wire lengths, I have an estimate of how long to make the wires. And I already started wiring up the sign some, but I didn't wire up any of the power runs going back to the control box. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to do, is just try to wire up the whole sign. And then once I finish wiring up the whole sign, I want to get a piece of wood, a 2x3, another 2x3 mounted across here to help so I can mount the control box. But I want to paint that piece of wood. But when I paint that piece of wood, I also want to go and touch up the exposed wood on the back here, but I don't want to touch up the exposed wood on the back till I have everything wired up and I'm verifying that all the LEDs are working. So that's why I want to go ahead and just wire up the sign. So here we go. Okay, so as you can see, I went ahead and hooked up the first letter, which is J. And everything's working. So I'm going to zoom into the control box and just show you what I'm doing. Okay, so basically I'm making the connections up just like I made the connections up in the previous video, just pre-tinning both wires, soldering them together, and then heat shrink and putting a little dielectric grease on it. And basically I brought the data line into the control board on the data line. And the data line is going to continue to daisy chain all the way out through the whole word Jesus. And then I brought my ground into the ground terminal strip. And the power I hooked up to this inline fuse and hooked up to the 5 volts. And according to the data sheet, 100 LEDs takes 30 watts. So 30 watts divided by 5 volts is 6 amps. So max draw would be 6 amps, and I either had a 5 amp or 8 amp fuse, so I decided to put an 8 amp fuse. And this might be overkill to fuse each individual string, but I figure since this sign's going to be outside, there is a probability of something getting shorted out. And if something does get shorted out, then everything's going to be fused. So that might be overkill, but that's how I'm doing it. And I'm just going to keep on bringing all the power wires in on here, and then when I get to the other words, I just put the data lines in on these 3, and I'm just going to continue at it. And then when I'm done, I'm going to try to tie the wires up to this 3D printed mount so that there's no possibility of any tension on the actual terminal. Okay, I already encountered my first problem. If you watch the LED come around on this L at one specific LED, it stops. So I already went and I already swapped the data lines to another data line just to make sure it wasn't an error in my code that it's not sending out the data, and it stops at the same LED both times. So I tested every single LED before I installed them in the sign. So somehow this LED went out, and it could be a problem with the LED before it not regenerating the data and spitting it out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this LED and jumper it out. And if it starts working after I cut out the LED, I know it's that LED I got to replace. If it still doesn't work, I know it's the LED before I got to replace. And then at that point, I just had to replace both LEDs because I already cut it out. Okay, I cut that LED out and temporarily just twisted the wires together. And everything works. So yeah, I got a bad LED somehow. So hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. Hopefully that's a fluke thing. But like I said, yeah, before I installed it in the sign, that LED worked.
Okay, I got the whole sign wired up, and as you see, it completely passed that little RGBW test that I made, program test. And as you can see, there is a flaw in that program that towards the end it starts turning on some other data in the array. So I gotta figure out what that flaw is. But everything's completely wired up, but I still need to go through wire management, but I'm gonna wait to do that until I permanently mount the control box to the sign, because I want to undo all the wires. The good news is the way I did this control box I'm really happy with, and I think once I get some zip ties and I zip tie everything, that it'll be a nice clean job for being in a Tupperware container. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to load the Arduino software on my laptop, so I can bring my laptop out here and try to program the whole sign to come on at once to see how it looks like. And I totally ran out. I was using 18. I had this on hand. I didn't buy it. I had it from another project, 18 gauge black, and I totally ran out of it. And I keep scrap wire around, and from a ceiling fan install, I had 18 gauge wire. So I had, between that roll and then a little bit of black 18 gauge, I was able to wire the whole thing in 18 gauge black without having to buy another roll. So if my dad's watching this, he always accuses me of keeping too much junk around, but in that case, keeping that junk around really paid off. So I'll go and try to get the whole sign lit up. Okay, so you saw it lit up for the first time. I do have a couple things I need to do. First of all, apparently I'm off on a couple of addresses. So I really gotta have the Arduino in a way where it's constantly plugged into the computer and I can just, constantly upload code without having to take stuff apart. The problem is that I tried to do it by taking out the fuse and powering the Arduino with the laptop and with the fuse out, and the Arduino was running and running the sign, but the problem was I couldn't connect the Arduino to the laptop. But like I said, this is a Chinese knockoff Arduino. It's almost like oh yeah, I couldn't. One of the problems was you just can't use a generic USB cable. You got to use the USB cable that came with this Arduino, because apparently they pinned it out differently. The laptop kept on saying there was a short on the USB every time I used a different cable. So yeah, I got to use the one that came with the Arduino. And then it's a real big pain in the butt taking this fuse in and out. So actually, what I need to do is I need to put in a power switch, which I have plenty of switches. I'll just put in a power switch to power it on and off. So I do need to take the board out to do that. But at least I know everything's working, so I can continue on tidying up my wiring and then securing the board. Okay, I added a switch to switch on the 5 volts on and off the Arduino so I could plug in USB cable. And this is the one that it came with, that apparently the positive and the negative swapped on this cable compared to a standard cable. But I wasn't paying attention to switch placement. I didn't realize that the USB port was right there. Maybe I was kind of doing it on the fly, but it works. You see, I can turn it on and the sign will actually light, and then when I want to program it, I just turn the switch off and then plug in the USB cable. Okay, I got it all set up. Apparently, since this was a knockoff Arduino and it has a knockoff FTDI chip, I had to download a special driver onto this laptop in order to get the Arduino to connect. And then, like I said, since this is a knockoff Arduino, apparently the pins on the USB are not pinned out standard, so you have to use the included USB. And then I have a USB extender going into the computer. Have my on and off switch so that way the Arduino, the 5 volts of the laptop doesn't get connected to the 5 volts of the power supplies. And then when I pull the USB out, I just flip the switch. So that worked out good. And I pretty much had to you had to program it inside the board because it would take forever. But I went and I corrected my problems mapping out. I corrected my problems mapping out the addresses. Apparently, I was 2 LEDs off on my count on Christ, so I ended up going overboard on one of the circuits. One of the circuits has 101 LEDs, but I don't think that'll work. And then another thing I found out that I didn't catch, I had to check that video I filmed. I have a green, this chip is working as far as it's passing the data through, but the green is out on that LED, so I'm gonna have to change that LED out. So if I change that LED out, since I installed the LEDs, I had 2 bad LEDs in the sign, and I just alternated colors to make sure I was getting the addressing right. The problem is you want to keep like this color and this I 2 different colors because the I kind of runs into the C. So I'm going to try to program a little animation and see how it looks. Okay, this is the example animation I made, and as you can see, definitely the green LED is out on that O and Lord, and it causes that gold color to be red, because I guess they're making that gold from red and a mixture of red and green. But I'll end this video here. Pretty much from here on out, I'm just gonna tie everything together and make it nice and neat, and then try to do better animations, come up with something better. Thanks for watching.